Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson Smith. Will be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at KSC. SpaceX is currently counting down to the end of today's launch window in the hopes that weather will cooperate enough to allow for the launch of the latest pair of satellites on behalf of Luxembourg-based communications company SES, one of the oldest customers that SpaceX has flown on its Falcon 9 family of vehicles. Currently T-minus 56 minutes, 16 seconds and counting to the planned departure of this particular Falcon 9 rocket. It has been an interesting weather day here on Florida's Space Coast, off and on rain, periodic thunder, and some lightning in the areas near and adjacent to the pad. As mentioned, SpaceX is targeting the end of the window, but we are starting to see a little bit of venting near the top of the strong back. Indication that it seems like SpaceX is making preparations to at least make a run at it with this final launch attempt opportunity available to them in today's current window. As we get things rolling, I want to thank the more than 2,100 plus of you who are joining with us live this afternoon. If you're joining us back again after watching the launch from Vandenberg, welcome back. If this is your first launch of the day, welcome in. We're glad to have you on board for today's launch attempt. We are joined in support with this mission, of course, with our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our photographers are out and about preparing to shoot this Falcon 9 rocket when it gets ready to take off. Adam Bernstein is out also ready to track the Falcon 9 if it is in fact able to make its ascent today. You can find the fellows over on X. Adam is at ABurnNYC, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. If you're not already following our channel broadly, you can find us at Spaceflight Now just by searching Spaceflight Now. We're also on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook. If you're not on X but on one of those other platforms, you can find us there as well. We'll also be joined with tracking support, assuming the Falcon 9 is able to launch today, by our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. It is a dreary day, as we mentioned, here on the Space Coast. Taking a look at another camera view, you can see just how many clouds are still hanging around the pad as we are looking at the possibility of a launch today. But again, rain continues at various pockets around Florida's Space Coast. There's a pocket of rain moving through the Melbourne area, which is about 40 minutes to the south of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And that's sort of been the case today, just off and on pockets of rain. It's the reason why the 45th Weather Squadron forecast just a 55% chance of favorable weather for today's launch opportunities. Meteorologists clocked the presence of cumulus clouds as well as a potential violation of the surface electric fields rule as potential launch constraints to the mission today. Of course, an important part of forecasting for a safe launch opportunity is ensuring that the Falcon 9 rocket in this case, or any other rocket in a different launch environment would not be passing through, especially thick clouds and potentially creating the risk for generating unnatural lightning by creating static electricity conditions. As SpaceX pivoted to the end of the launch window today, they also made note that they are continuing to watch the weather for this launch opportunity. If SpaceX is unable to launch today because of the weather or technical issues, they do have a backup opportunity currently available on Wednesday, December 18th, during a window that extends the same length of time as today, 1 hour, 27 minutes, opening this time at 4 p.m. Eastern. Again, that's in a 24-hour backup scenario. For those curious what the weather looks like, if they do need to pause, pivot, and look to tomorrow, weather does improve a bit. 65% chance of favorable weather conditions. A bit better than 55. Still not ideal, though. We'll see if SpaceX is able to thread the needle, though, today. As we get rolling on here with our live launch coverage, do want to once again thank the 2,500 of you who are watching with us live. If you haven't already, you could do us a big solid just by hitting the like button. It allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also want to thank our moderators in the live chat, Aussie Space Girl Callistia Lee, for helping us out with this live stream, helping to ensure that folks can have good, robust conversations in live chat, but also remain respectful of one another. Speaking of the chat, we are powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube that makes these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Butterfly, the Rocket Girl, Sulfur for Lunch, Gilly the Girl, Rick Donner, Jeff Hansen, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our member-only Discord community, and the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here at the Cape in 4K. Last bit of housekeeping here. If you have a comment or question about this mission or just want to offer a little support this afternoon, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And not only will it be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is always greatly appreciated. Now T-minus 48 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. For those who were with us for our launch coverage of the Vandenberg mission this morning, you will have been very recently refreshed on the launch countdown timeline for SpaceX. But for those who weren't with us this morning or yesterday, go ahead and give you a quick refresh. Or if you just want to know what's going on, here's the countdown timeline, sequence of events in a nominal countdown scenario. Generally speaking, T-minus 38 minutes is when SpaceX will conduct their poll on the start of prop load. SpaceX does this poll electronically, so they are able to pivot and take it early if they feel like they're in a good position to give the go-ahead for fueling their Falcon 9 rocket. If the green light is given, fueling begins the T-minus 35-minute mark with a couple of events. First, we have RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, that's loaded on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen begins to flow on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, they start loading a cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels on the main propellant tanks during flight. Same is true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. Helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks. T-minus 23 minutes is when the Second stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process gets underway. It's when SpaceX begins to condition the feed lines at the pad prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. Typically, we see the big event that comes as a result of that over on pad 40 at about T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. Here at pad 39A, it comes just a hair earlier. Regardless of when it starts, it sets the stage for second stage liquid oxygen load to begin. Last time we had a weather issue crop up, you recall that was on the RRT-1 mission this past Friday, and it was the lack of a big vent that was an important indication that while fueling using liquid oxygen on the first stage and RP1 on the booster and the second stage had begun, second stage LOX load never began. So that'll certainly be something that we're keeping a, pardon the pun, weather eye out for as SpaceX potentially gets into fueling here in just a little more than 10 minutes. Continue on the countdown timeline. T minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. This involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. It's key because it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence gets underway. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector with a strong back will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before launch, the first stage LOX tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute thereafter, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will have their go for launch call come up at about T minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command comes at T minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Currently set for 5:26 p.m. Eastern, 22:26 UTC. Coming up, T minus 44 minutes and 8 seconds. Now T minus 41 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. We're cruising towards the point at which the SpaceX launch director is going to have to make a call on the start of prop load for today's mission. One thing of note that you will have likely noticed just by looking at the Falcon 9 rocket is that this particular vehicle is pretty darn sparkly white. That's because it's launching for a first time. This first stage booster B1090 making its debut as part of the SpaceX fleet. So no booster history to speak of on this one as the lighting changes and illuminates the rocket a little bit more dramatically. Of course, SpaceX will recover this vehicle, or that's the plan, of course, set to land on the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions, which is positioned out in the Atlantic Ocean. If successful, this booster landing will mark the 102nd booster landing on that particular drone ship and the 385th Falcon booster landing to date. On board this Falcon 9 rocket are a pair of satellites on behalf of, again, Luxembourg-based company SES. It will be heading to a medium Earth orbit once they're deployed from the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. First satellite separates from the upper stage about 1 hour, 53 minutes, and 5 seconds post liftoff. The second just after the 2-hour mark. For those who've been tracking the development of SES's O3b mPOWER constellation, you may recall that there was an electrical issue on the first few satellites that were launched into this constellation. Required some corrections to be taken. However, those fixes weren't put in place before the launch of satellites numbers 5 and 6, which launched in December of 2023. This is the first launch of O3b mPOWER satellites so far in 2024 and will be the only launch this year for SES as far as its O3b mPOWER satellites are concerned. These two satellites feature the first ones that include the upgraded fixes. Those changes were made throughout the satellites that were previously ordered, satellites number 7 through 11. SES also ordered 2 additional satellites to round out its constellation. All these satellites built by Boeing. Now T minus 30 minutes and counting. Nominally speaking, this is the point where SpaceX will have now made a call on the start of prop load, or perhaps just a few seconds thereafter, the minute mark. At T minus 35 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. Briefly mentioned the O3B mPOWER satellites numbers 7 and 8. Here's an image of what they actually look like stacked in their launch configuration. This photo captured by SpaceX, shared by SES prior to their encapsulation inside those two Falcon 9 payload fairings. Might be a little bit hard to see, but if you look near the base of those payload fairings as well, you can actually see the tail number of the two fairing halves that are going to be flying this mission. On the left, you can make out what appears to be 214, and on the right, number 185. SpaceX doesn't often talk about the payload fairings and how many missions they have flown, especially within the context of a tail number. But certainly looks like 185 has had a number of missions that it has flown, or at least once. Hopefully during the commentary, the SpaceX commentator will add some additional color that we can report out to you. Now T minus 34 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Assuming SpaceX feels like they're in a good posture to proceed towards launch, fueling will now be underway. As we await word from SpaceX on the start of fueling today, if they feel like they're in a good posture to do so, here's what we're going to be looking for visually. You see near the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, normally with a flight-proven booster, it's a little easier to point out where exactly we're looking, and the frost line won't be quite as stark since it's going to be essentially bright white on bright white, but just beneath the X in SpaceX, just below that point is where the base of the LOX tank is, where we start to see a frost line form once the super cold densified liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Also, given that the air here in Florida is much warmer and more moist, more humid, it'll meet the much colder rocket and start to form some vapor clouds in the area of the booster once fueling is underway. Again, the lighting will make it a little bit tricky to see, especially with the backlighting of the clouds behind the pad from our camera's vantage point. So hopefully we'll get word from SpaceX one way or the other on the start of fueling, or if they are up against it from a weather perspective. At T minus 31 minutes, 51 seconds and counting, we do believe we are seeing some vapor forming just beneath the X in SpaceX. Visual indication that fueling is in fact underway, which means SpaceX is going to at least make an attempt at launching coming up here at the end of their launch window today. That, of course, being 5:26 p.m. Eastern, 22:26 UTC. Now T minus 28 minutes, 2 seconds and counting. Continuing to watch the weather as SpaceX counts down towards the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. You can see basically the main pocket of concern for the Sunshine State is hovering right around the area of the pad, as you can see from this radar view here. That cell sitting just below Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, the Kennedy Space Center. Those clouds have been swirling around Brevard County and the Space Coast for some time now. Again, more rain and lightning and thunder happening further south than Pad 39A as far as the main localized weather impacts for residents in the area. However, if there is a cell that is close enough to the pad, that could create a weather violation for SpaceX. So they will continue to track that over the next several minutes and make calls as they continue to go along through the fueling process. Now T minus 25 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. I want to thank the more than 7,000 of you who are watching with us live this afternoon. Certainly appreciate you taking part of your day to be with us. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us, allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we continue on through the count. Also want to thank a couple folks for some super chats today. Channel member Jeff Hansen with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Jeff. He says, go Kennedy, go SpaceX, go Falcon 9, go O3B, Godspeed 1090. 1090, of course, is the booster tail number that's flying today's mission. O3B, an abbreviation for the O3B M-Power satellites. Also want to thank channel member and moderator Callistia Lee for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Callistia, for supporting at that level and for all you do as a moderator here at Spaceflight Now. Very kindly putting that as a, quote, donation for Will's Tea and Halls Fund. It's been a bit taxing on the old voice having 3 launches within the past 24 hours, but I think we've got some ginger tea that I've been sipping on through the day, so holding out. One more to go. Thank you again for the kind words and for the support. We're now T minus 22 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. As we are awaiting the so-called big vent, let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket is going to be flying once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Once SpaceX gives the go-ahead for this Falcon 9 rocket to take off, it's going to depart from Historic Launch Complex 39A and fly in largely due east trajectory here, heading out over the Atlantic Ocean. The first stage booster B-1090 following that red arc there for a drone ship landing on the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. The two payload fairings that you saw in the image that showed the satellites being encapsulated will also be recovered on this mission. SpaceX will use one of its recovery vessels to meet those fairing halves once they splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes. And they'll be brought aboard one of the recovery vessels. Earlier today, SpaceX, or I should say yesterday, SpaceX used the drone ship Doug in support of the RRT-1 mission. You can read all about that on our website right now, spaceflightnow.com. Meaning today, likely they'll have Bob go out and work this mission. The name Bob comes from former NASA astronaut Bob Behnken, who was one of the two astronauts who flew the Demo 2 mission back in May of 2020. Currently T minus 20 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX, if they're ready to do so, will have begun the chill down process for the feed lines there at the pad, and we should be seeing the start of the big vent right now. There we go. The big vent does begin a little bit earlier here than it does at pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. But this venting you're seeing here is a good visual indication that A, fueling is in fact continuing as we speak, and B, that they are in the process of making preparations for second stage liquid oxygen loading, which is set to begin at the T minus 16-minute mark. As the big event begins to wind down with just a little less than a minute left to go, want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, Toby Wolbe, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity. To our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Toby in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership here at Spaceflight Now. Now, T minus 16 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. You can see the big vent has concluded. Second stage LOX load just about to get underway here in about 10 seconds. Now, T minus 14 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. In the next minute or two, we should be getting some pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket from SpaceX. So far, from a countdown timeline perspective, things are continuing to move smoothly for this mission. Obviously, weather continues to be an item that SpaceX and the range are watching as the countdown progresses. The next milestone for this Falcon 9 rocket will be the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. That's set to begin the T minus 7 minute mark. T minus 12 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. Been a busy day for SpaceX as they returned their crew or cargo Dragon spacecraft from the International Space Station. Also, NASA made an announcement that they are delaying the launch of the Crew 10 mission. Was originally set to launch in the February timeframe, now delayed till March. And that's in order to allow for more time to process the Crew Dragon spacecraft that will support this mission. A site that we haven't seen in some time, SpaceX actually flying a branded payload fairing half here as we're getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket. One of the reasons that we don't see this very often is because branded payload fairing comes at the cost of the customer. Commentator John Insprucker says the cumulus cloud that they're tracking to the northeast of the pad, which you're seeing there in the big box, they're expecting to clear by the T-5 minute mark. So whether it continues to be a watch item being closely tracked by the SpaceX teams as well. 45th Weather Squadron. Let's talk about the Falcon 9 rocket as SpaceX provides some annotated views of the vehicle. Let's start at the top, work our way to the bottom. Payload fairings at the top of the vehicle are 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. They'll float down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes. There's that photo again of encapsulation day. Just beneath the payload fairings is the Falcon 9's second stage, upper stage of a Falcon 9 rocket powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space. Merlin vacuum engine produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust. It'll be fired twice on today's flight, actually three times before the deployment of the two M-Power satellites. Just beneath the second stage is the inner stage, a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. It has deployable hypersonic grid fins that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9's first stage. At the top of the inner stage are three mechanical latches that attach to the second stage and at first stage main engine cutoff. High pressure helium is used to release those latches, and four pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Once again, the first stage booster, which will land on this drone ship you see right here. This is just read the instructions. According to SpaceX, it's about 650 kilometers out from the launch pad due east. Now T-8 minutes, 4 seconds and counting. Just a quick point of note here. You'll notice our countdown clock slightly different than what you're seeing from the SpaceX feed and the big box here. Reason being, our clock is in real time. What's coming in from SpaceX is on a slight delay. And so we'll be making our call outs in real time until we are relying solely on SpaceX's onboard camera views. Getting ready to see a promotional video from SES, which unfortunately does include music, so we're not able to bring the sound up. for risk of potentially incurring a copyright strike from YouTube. The O3B mPOWER satellites are launched in pairs and they operate about 8,000 kilometers or about 4,900 miles away from the Earth's surface at an inclination of 70 degrees, giving it wide global coverage. With these two satellites, SES will have sent up now 8 of these O3B mPOWER satellites, the second generation of the O3B type satellite. Now T minus 6 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Next milestone happening just about now is the first stage kerosene tank should have finished fueling at this point. This, as you saw with the lower third graphic, is the CEO of SES. Satellites that are launching today, as well as the other 6 O3B mPOWER satellites that have been launched to medium Earth orbit so far, were manufactured by Boeing. Do have a bit of breaking news as we're on air right now. In a statement that was just released by the FAA, they said, and I'll quote them here, the FAA continues to increase efficiencies in our licensing determination activities to meet the needs of the commercial space transportation industry. This license modification that we are issuing is well ahead of the Starship Flight 7 launch date and is another example of the FAA's commitment to enable safe space transportation, end quote. So the FAA has officially given the green light for SpaceX to proceed with Flight 7 of its Starship rocket from down in Boca Chica. There has been some indication that a launch in the mid-January timeframe is possible. Just reading this information as it's coming down here, as we're keeping an eye as well on this mission here. Call for the strong back retract sequence has been given. Those clamp arms now opening up just beneath the base of the payload fairings. Here you see the transporter erector now reclining back away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Now T minus 2 minutes, 56 seconds, counting. Coming up on the call for conclusion of stage 1 LOX load. Let's listen in.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
And a good call from SpaceX on stage 1 LOX load. We're now waiting for the final fueling call, which is coming up here in the next 30 seconds, which will be the conclusion of second stage LOX load. Our T-minus 2 minutes and counting. Taking a quick look at the live chat here, I want to thank the now 23,000 of you who are watching as we got the call that stage 2 LOX load is complete. Seeing the ground gas closeouts here at the pad as SpaceX clears any remaining LOX from the feed lines. Very briefly, want to thank Denise Davidson for joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level, to Patty Chichil for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships, and to Tony Maloney for a £5 super chat saying a donation for you, Spaceflight Now. You deserve it for your efforts, bud. Thank you for the kind words. With just about a minute left to go here remaining before liftoff, we're going to go ahead and keep our attention on the Falcon 9 rocket. Welcome back to the live chat on the other side of launch. T-minus 1 minute and counting. "50 seconds and counting." We're listening for the launch director's go for launch as the call off for startup confirmed.
Systems.
LD, go for launch.
With that call, we are go for launch, less than 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. 20 seconds. SpaceX report everything is go for launch with this mission. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the O3B Power Satellites 7 and 8 mission launch. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Now a little more than a minute into flight, the Falcon 9 traveling faster than the speed of sound. Passing through max Q, the vehicle is now throttling up on its engines back to full power. Despite some trickiness with the weather, so far a good ascent of the Falcon 9 rocket on this flight. We're coming up on a few different events in fairly rapid succession here. We'll see at about T plus 2 minutes and 30 seconds, first stage main engine cutoff. That'll be followed by stage separation, the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine, and then the separation of the payload fairing halves at about T plus 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Coming up on the MECO. Stage separation. And SES-1.
Stage separation confirmed. Evacuation.
All good calls, good views from the Falcon 9 onboard cameras. We're less than 30 seconds away from the deployment of the payload fairings.
Fairing separation confirmed.
There you saw views of the payload fairings being deployed. There you can see them just off of the edge of the nozzle there from this onboard camera view. You can see in the big box, the remnants of the plume following launch drifting off just to the left of the frame of the big box there against a lovely Florida sunset. Now 4 minutes, 42 seconds and counting into this mission. We're coming up on the first stage entry burn getting underway. That's coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 20 seconds. That'll be the ignition of 3 of the Merlin engines on the base of the Falcon 9 first stage. If you'll notice, just between the hypersonic grid fins on the Falcon booster there on the left-hand side of your screen, well, this is a view through the inner stage at the top of the booster. Once it goes back to the views looking back down towards Earth, those bursts that you'll see occasionally, those are the cold gas thrusters, which help adjust the attitude or the positioning of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. SpaceX going full screen there on the upper stage engine, the Merlin vacuum engine, continuing on with a good burn. SpaceX's John Insprucker noting that the camera views on board the Falcon 9's second stage will conclude following the landing of the booster on the drone ship. Just read the instructions, and so we'll likely get updates through social media about deployment.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1 F.
Good call on the start of entry burn here. This burn lasting about 26 seconds in total. Coming up on entry burn shutdown.
Shutdown.
Good call from SpaceX. There are those thrusters I was talking about. A little more than 7 minutes into flight now. Unlike a Starlink launch in which we see the booster landing before the second stage engine cuts off, we're actually going to come up on SECO 1 or second stage engine cutoff coming up in now 30 seconds. and then the landing burn will begin about 10 seconds after that. Coming up on Seco 1 here. Just about 10 seconds on the SpaceX feed.
Waiting for the call out for Seco.
Back shutdown.
We've got MVAC engine shutdown.
Nominal parking orbit. Stage 1 landing burn.
And both call-outs right on time. Guidance reports a nominal parking orbit for the second stage. The first stage has begun the landing burn. Headed to the drone ship on the power of the center engine E9.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
All right, and we have touchdown of formerly new booster on the drone ship out in the Atlantic. So there you have it. That landing marks SpaceX's 385th recovery of an orbital class rocket. That includes first stage landings for both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. Meanwhile,
Seeing some good views from the upper stage, and as John Sparker was noting, on the other side of the Merlin vacuum engine, hopefully they toggle back to it before the views go away. Well, they're taking a look at the payload adapter here for the SES-03BM power satellites. But yeah, just over the horizon line, you can see the plume from the launch. So a really nice echo of the launch that just happened. And a nice little visual bookend for our day in launch today. Started with the launch from Vandenberg for the NRO. That gave us a little glimpse of orbital sunrise, and we end our day with an orbital sunset. Lovely poetic way to end the day. SpaceX about to wrap up these onboard camera views and confirmed deployment of the two spacecraft coming up nearly 2 hours post-launch on social media. So in just a moment, we're going to go ahead and pivot back to our views here at the pad. Just going to let these views linger as long as they lasted, and it wasn't very long. Back here at the pad, SpaceX will be bringing the Strong back into an upright position as part of its